Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class here at CSLDallas. I'm Dr. Petra, and I hope you remember to change your clocks. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you in an hour. So it looks like that might be happening here in person as well. It's always a little challenging. I hope they figure it out. I hope they decide that we're going to stay on one time or the other. All right, so we're on treatment. We're beginning to talk about what Ernest Holmes calls spiritual mind treatment. Actually, in the Science of Mind, he writes it in a number of different ways. He calls it spiritual mind treatment. He also differentiates between mental treatment and spiritual treatment. And there are various descriptions and ways to do this thing called treatment, spiritual mind treatment. So we can start out by recognizing that this is a spiritual technology, and it is designed for us to actively engage in co-creation. A treatment is an active thing. When one gives a treatment, one is not sitting around hoping that something may happen. One is definitely, constructively, actively stating, sensing, and knowing some specific good. This is in accord with the principle which we seek to demonstrate. And so the idea here is we are using this particular spiritual practice or this particular form for something that we want to definitely, constructively, actively state, sensing and knowing that this specific good is ours. And if you'll recall, earlier in this chapter, we talked about the idea that we have to actively embrace, actively accept our good in consciousness to draw new good into our lives. Otherwise, we tend to just sort of recreate over and over and over again the same kind of experience, the same kind of life experience, the same kind of expression. And so this is spiritual mind treatment is designed to make a change, make some kind of manifestation, whether that manifestation is a change in perspective, in perception, in actual physical rearranging the molecules of the universe, in a healing, or in the constructive growth of something. Now, in the process of spiritual mind treatment, we do commune with the One. We do move into that place where we're experiencing our truth and we recognize the nature of reality. But a treatment is designed to do something very specific. In a lot of cases, we use spiritual mind treatment. We have fallen into the habit of saying that spiritual mind treatment is an affirmative prayer. And that's true, but there are many ways to pray. Actually, in our Judeo-Christian Bible, especially in the Hebrew portion of the Judeo-Christian Bible, there are 7 different kinds of prayers evidenced in the stories, in the writings, especially in the Psalms. There's prayers of lamentation, prayers of affirmation, prayers of celebration, prayers of gratitude. And there's all different kinds of prayers. In the Eastern tradition, we have prayers that are blessings. We get those in the Celtic tradition as well. We have prayers that are not so specific, but more opportunities for us to experience the presence. What we don't want to do is think that spiritual mind treatment is the only kind of prayer we can ever do. What we want to understand is that spiritual mind treatment is a powerful spiritual practice when we seek to be deliberately and specifically engaged in co-creating our lives. Again, whether that co-creation is an outward manifestation or an inner demonstration of a change in consciousness or a shift in perspective. Treatment is something that we use definitely, constructively, actively stating, sensing, knowing some specific good. And so we can also recognize that when we get to the sensing and knowing part of it, is that it's a full experience. unlike perhaps an affirmation, which is I'm going to say these words to myself over and over and over again, a spiritual mind treatment is designed to actually develop and shift consciousness. And that is an embodied experience. So it's not enough to just intellectually state the things, but we really want to work to embody them. And this is in accord with this principle that we've been talking about for weeks, if not months now, the principle and the universal laws and how it works. If we give treatments without a definite motive in mind, the most we can accomplish will be to promote a salutary atmosphere. A passive meditation will never produce an active demonstration any more than an artist can paint a picture by sitting down with his paints but never using them. The paint will not throw itself onto the canvas. One might do work in here to imagine what that painting is going to be, but ultimately the artist has to pick up the paints in some form or fashion, whether it's to throw the paint at the canvas or to painstakingly draw it, or everything in between, right? Our spiritual mind treatment is an active, engaged spiritual practice that is taking up the paintbrush and painting on the canvas of our lives in some specific and definite way. Now, our practitioners do spiritual mind treatment. They will do it for you. They know in their own consciousness a truth about you or about a particular situation. And what they're doing is exactly the same thing that when we do a spiritual mind treatment for ourselves. We are using the law and aiming that law and intentionality, the co-creative principle, at some definite and specified outcome. Again, that specified outcome could be, I more experience the love that I know is coming to me. Or it can be a very specific thing. My business is growing. I'm experiencing a healing. I am enjoying a vacation I've never been on. Do you see? It can be about any particular thing. And again, we use that word thing lightly, not just a specific physical thing. And so we want to learn how to do spiritual mind treatment, which is one of the reasons why we have so many classes. A lot of our classes are focused on the technique of spiritual mind treatment. And again, there's nothing magic about the technique. It is, over time, what has become a way of really providing oneself with an avenue to shift consciousness, right? To really move through the kinds of things that we need to know and experience so that we can truly believe that what we say to be true is in fact true, and not just wishful thinking or hoping. The mind must conceive before the creative energy can produce. We must supply the avenue which it can work. It is ready and willing. It is its nature to spring into being through our thought and action, right? We're simply using a co-creative process. We're simply engaging in the action of the universal principles, and we are taking our place as co-creators rather than simply at the whim or mercy of either something out there or, quite frankly, our own habitual patterns and ways of thinking. So, spiritual mind treatment is very active. It's not passive. And I will tell you that for me, I've been doing spiritual mind treatment, gosh, I hate to even say it out loud, for 40 years. And it, for me, has been the most consistent and worthwhile spiritual practice. And it has not only shifted consciousness and allowed me to co-create and experience things, but ultimately, in the course of layer after layer after layer after layer, year after year after year of spiritual mind treatment, I actually began to believe all of the things that I was saying in that spiritual mind treatment, which began to shift things like at a cellular level, at a deep psychological level, and open those channels, those spiritual channels, where we begin to live from a place of oneness, from spiritual truth. Ultimately, all spiritual work is to move us to the place where we are living from our spiritual truth and our spiritual identity, rather than hoping for it to appear in our lives, rather than hoping to bridge a gap which actually doesn't exist. And so spiritual mind treatment has also that long-term extraordinary benefit. And whether you do it yourself or you work through a practitioner on a regular basis, that kind of work can do really deep, deep work of moving us into our spiritual identity. So, oh, and there's one other thing. We have a fabulous e-course out on our e-course platform. You can get to it through CSLDallas.org and the education tab. There's a link to e-courses, and we have that's the royal we. Ryan and I made a class, an e-course called Mysticism and Manifestation. And it marries the communion with our oneness with this co-creative process. And it is all about spiritual mind treatment, how to do a spiritual mind treatment. So I highly recommend it. It's so far one of the best e-courses, I think, that I've personally been able to create. And so you can get that out there if you're not able to come to a class that's happening pretty soon. All right, so we're going to stop there, and I'd love to hear you. Oh, and let me say one last thing. If you're relatively new to CSL Dallas and you hear people talk about TSRW, right? TSRW, this shit really works, and if that offends you, you can say this science really works or this stuff really works. And it's what we say when our treatment has demonstrated, like some way of like going, TSRW, this really worked. And the more that we use spiritual mind treatment and the more we show ourselves that it works, the more powerful our belief in the process becomes. And what do we know? It's done unto you as you believe. So the more we believe in the spiritual mind treatment as an active process of co-creation and an active way to use the universal laws, then of course the more efficacy it has, because we have less resistance to the process and we have less resistance to the outcome. And so the more TSRWs we can have, the more powerful our co-creative process has become, and the more deeply we can accept that we are in fact spiritual beings having a human experience, that our spiritual identity is in fact the truth of who we are. And it is the place from which we want to move in the world. We want to move in the world from our spiritual identity. So we're going to stop there. I'd love to check in with you guys. First of all, stories about spiritual mind treatment, stories about using practitioners. We can really inspire each other in that way. And other questions. For some of you, this will be brand new. You've never heard of it before. You've never taken a class in it. And we will be talking about it over the next few weeks. But some of you have, and if you have comments or questions that you have about treatment, this would be the perfect time to ask those. So we're going to say good morning to Ryan and good morning to all of you out there online, and see what questions we have in the room and what questions we have or sharings we have online. So Ryan.
Well, good morning to you too, Dr. Petra, and hello to everybody here in the room with me and everybody all across the world on the ethernets of the internet. Good morning to all of you as well. And like Dr. Petra explained, this is an interactive discussion. We love to hear from you, your thoughts and questions. And so myself and the iconic Richard over here help to do that. And we also ask that you volunteer and participate too. Now, for those in the room, I have the magic wand baton that you can use, and this, just say your name, your question, and then the folks online can hear you as well. And for those who are joining us in the Zoom room today, you have the magic wand baton in your hand by clicking that hand icon located down below under the More section. You should be able to click on that, and we can bring you into the room as well. And for those who are joining us all over the globe, you can feel free to put your question and comment inside of the Facebook or Zoom chat, and I can bring that into the room. And I always like to mention that I do keep those anonymous. That way we can have a safe container of spiritual growth. So, would anybody here in the room like to share their experience, or maybe a TSRW? Oh, all right, here we go.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann. I had one quick comment and one question.
Great.
The comment was when I first started with Science of Mind about 2015. I had on my phone the list of prayers that I was doing, treatments that I was doing, and every time one of them became a TSRW, I put a little thumbs up icon next to them, and I have lots of thumbs up, you know.
Yay, I love that. That's
so
awesome.
I like the visual. But for those that I wrote down into my phone, those were ones where I went into like my meditation area, closed the door, sat down, did all 5 steps, you know, thoroughly and actively. But then there's other prayers where it's more, you know, I might not do all 5 steps. I might just focus on the
end result,
yes,
or the realization,
result.
or the realization step.
I'm looking for realization. And those are TSRWs too, but I didn't, since there's such a difference between when I go into my room and close the door, and just kind of wondering, is one stronger than the other? I guess not, but it's just a different experience.
Yeah, it's a great question, Anne. So in the Science of Mind, as we read along, you'll notice that we talk about 2 different kinds of spiritual mind treatment. One's called the argumentative treatment, and one's called the realization treatment. We use the argumentative treatment, which is what he also calls the mental treatment, which is the deliberate use of the 5 steps, basically because we are convincing ourselves. We are like a lawyer presenting a case to our own consciousness, so that we can move to that place where we can accept that that good is actually ours. And that's when we go and we do very deliberate spiritual mind treatment. We use all 5 steps. We go into a practitioner. We ask them to do that for us as well. So it's a powerful way to use spiritual mind treatment. And it is especially excellent when we have any withhold or doubt, or we can't quite get there on our own, right? Spiritual mind treatment is designed to get us there. When we have done a fair amount of spiritual work, and we already know that when we speak our word, we're speaking from the consciousness of being a co-creator, then we can basically do what's called the realization step, because we've already remembered that there is a power and a presence, we're using it, and we can use it, and now we're sort of contemplating in the realization of our good. And I don't know about you, but when I do that, I sort of automatically go to gratitude anyway, right? Which immediately begins to move us through the last steps of spiritual mind treatment. And so they have everything to do with where we're coming from, right? Now, on the other hand, the third thing I would say about it is, so I have 3 prayer partners. So I regularly meet with 3 different people throughout the week, and we're always talking about, and it's, you know, I always have something to talk about, right? It's either my son, or it's work, or it's the situation in the world, or it's my, you know, the hangnail on my toe, or just, oh my God, right now I'm in a sweet spot. And every single time we do a full 5-step spiritual mind treatment, not necessarily because we always need to so much shift consciousness, although sometimes we do, which is why I'm asking for treatment about that thing. But the other side of that coin is we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks in our Step Out in Faith program. There's the building of a consciousness and an acceptance of our good. And sometimes doing a full spiritual mind treatment for me is just like giving myself the most amazing spiritual meal. And I'm reveling in every aspect of the process, and I have the opportunity of spending time with, how do I specifically know in this moment that there is this one life, and usually some metaphor comes to me, and I can just hang in there for a while and make it more and more palpably real to myself, and then do the second step, which is the unification or identifying, remembering that's really like, wow, that's me. And then when I'm painting the picture of the outcome, whether I'm using very specific language or very metaphorical language, do you see, it's like getting the paintbrush out and starting to paint on the canvas and getting to revel in it. I love reveling in the truth. Right, and just being able to be in that space for myself or for someone else is so powerful and so enjoyable, right? It's such a profound thing to spend time just in that space. And for me, like pretty much most people that I know, if I just flat out meditate, I can have long periods of time where I'm sitting on the cushion, but I am thinking about something else. Right? I'm thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow, or all of a sudden I'm remembering something I didn't do today, or whatever it is, right? The 5 steps, using the 5 steps of spiritual mind treatment, especially in that place where I'm just reveling in truth, it keeps me focused so that I don't get lost in the sort of meditation of it. And all of a sudden, I find myself drifting off into, a memory or the movie I watched last week, so it keeps it very focused. So there's lots and lots of ways in which we can utilize the pattern or the form of treatment. And so the last thing I would say about that, because it's such a great question, Anne, is that I always liken it a little bit to learning music. Right? When you learn a piece of music, you generally learn it on a particular instrument. So, one, you have to learn music. You have to learn notes and sharps and flats. You have to learn scales. And then you also have to learn how to play that on the particular instrument. Whether you're strumming a guitar or a piano or a flute or whatever it is, you actually have to learn the motions and the muscle memory, right? And usually we do that by learning the scales, learning musical theory, and then playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then, we might graduate to, I don't know, the Beatles or Led Zeppelin or Bach or whatever it is that, floats your boat. And then we follow the music, and the music gets more and more complicated, and all of a sudden we're not playing just the music in front of us, right? We're playing with our own inflection, but we're still using the same notes and scale that we learned way back when. We're still using the same fingering, let's say on the piano, but it's now become it's now automatic to do that. And if we do it enough, right, we eventually move to the place where we start improvising, we start playing around with how might I shift this melody, how might I play with this, even to the point of writing music. But in every case, it's built on the structure of musical theory and of the way an instrument needs to be played, even if we're discovering a whole new way that an instrument needs to be played. There are patterns and things that we learn and discover. And so spiritual mind treatment is like that structure, which the better that we learn it and embody it as an automatic practice, the more it serves us when we have those moments where we're just like realizing truth, because we've already done it so much that that's already there. And it's a lovely thing. So what we want to do is have all the ways in which we can engage in spiritual mind treatment available to us. and not box it into one particular way as if one way were better than another. They're not. Sometimes I need to walk myself through those 5 steps because I'm afraid. Or I've gotten caught on something and I'm like, and I'm obsessed about it and I'm anxious about it and I'm going to walk myself through those 5 steps. Other things, I go into it already knowing the truth. So great question, Anne. All right, Ryan.
Yes, and so I wanted to give a shout out to all the people who are inside of a home study group, because that's where this question comes from.
Great.
So yes, and if you're not in one, we'll be coming up with a new one starting this summer.
Yeah, in June.
Yeah, there are great ways to get in touch with other people and to do these spiritual practices. So the question is, this person was watching the first video in the series and wanted to know more about the law and how it works. Can you explain a little bit more about the law and how it works?
Oh, absolutely. And you can go back to, on our YouTube, you can go back to some of the earlier classes from probably, October and November. We were deep into the introduction to the law. The universal law, right, is ultimately the earliest way in which the universal law was ever described is from the Hermetic teaching. It's the most ancient description we have of it, which is as above, so below. As above, recognizing that as above is the intangible causal realm, whether we call it the spiritual realm or the mental realm. Plato called it the realm of ideas. Plotinus called it the realm of ideals. Whatever we call it, right, as above, so below. Psychology then went on to discover in the last 100 years, right, that so much of what we receive and experience is what we expect, and how our filters draw in what we're looking at. So from ancient, through the teachings of Jesus, through the teachings in Hinduism, all of them reflect this idea that there are universal principles, and the most fundamental one, as above, so below, is also translated into the law of cause and effect. So every outward expression has a mental and spiritual cause, has something behind it. I mean, we can take as simple as a chair. Somebody somewhere along the line got tired of sitting on the ground by the fire, and they rolled up a stump or a rock, and they said, ooh, this is a whole lot easier, right? That was an idea that somebody had. My knees don't work quite so well, or whatever it was. And then eventually somebody said, man, this would be a whole lot easier if it had a back. And then we had wooden chairs for, ever. And then it was like, oh, but I'd like for it to be cushy. Do you see how the evolution is? Just one idea after another then translates into things. But that's not just true in terms of manufacturing them. That's actually true from this deep spiritual reality that cause, it always precedes an effect. And so that's a universal principle, which they're now, of course, they're working with the wave particle thing, right? How does a wave become a particle? And so far, the only answer they have to that is that we observe it into particularization. It's a whole other way of thinking about the law of cause and effect, right? The observation becomes the causal thing, the expectation. Anyway, so that's sort of beside the point. So then we have lots of ways in the spiritual teachings that this universal law has been talked about. You can talk about the laws of attraction, the law of circulation, the law of correspondence, the law of mental equivalence. I'm sure there's 6 other ones that I can't think of right now, which are all different ways of describing different ways that this law acts, or that we can engage with this law. So thinking in terms of like the law of mathematics, well, you can use it to add, but you can also use it to subtract. You can use it to find fractions. You can use it to decide which thing in the store is a better value, right? Lots of different ways, and we would call one you're creating an algebraic function, another one you're doing calculus, God forbid. I never got quite that far, or you're doing geometry or trigonometry, right? It's all math. It's all using the universal principles of mathematics, but you're structured in different ways and you're using it for different purposes. So we get variations of the law, of these universal principles that are all sort of ways in which to understand the universal principle. And all of them are the way in which we understand that creation happens. Because that's always the question, right? How the heck did anything get to be here? Well, it's either some guy in the sky or some series of deities, right? Or there's something more going on. And so if there's a creative, so the understanding that we use as the map for our nature of reality is that there's a creative process, and that creative process is governed by universal principles. What we would say is the law or the principles. And this is the structure that we can engage with to co-create. Take classes. There's only so much I can say in 5 minutes. All right.
Yeah, keep coming back. That's all I can say. And we have a ton of content out there on YouTube and social media too, so it's always good to go back and listen to some of that stuff, give yourself an idea.
Yeah, it's good.
I do got to shout out Richard, because Richard, we have years worth of stuff, so it's a plethora. A plethora upon plethoras.
Right, it's true, it's true.
I just want to poll the audience here in the room. Would anybody else like to have a question or comment?
Right up here, right up over there. We got 3 over here. Did we have one over here?
Ping, ping, ping.
Okay.
How do you want to go?
Well, let's start in the front and we'll pass it back.
All right, let's do that. And everybody volunteer, get Linda a hand to give it to a friend. All right, there you go.
So,
My name is.
hi, my name's Betty. Hello, Petra. So I grew up taught that the football team who prays the hardest is the football team who wins. And then you get older and you learn science of mind and about spiritual mind treatment, and you learn that prayer is a small part of practice. It takes a whole lot more than just being the person who prayed the hardest. So with that in mind, my biggest obstacle in believing is when I have and a lot of people, when we have a prayer or a wish or a treatment that does not come to fruition, and then that faith is shaken, and it becomes a question of, well, did I not practice properly, or did I not properly know the truth?
All good questions. So first of all, I'm going to suggest that a wish and a prayer and a treatment are 3 entirely different things. So we can't use those words synonymously. Here, we're going to stay right up here with Carmen.
No, I'll raise my hand over her.
Oh, okay, great. So a wish is neither a prayer nor a treatment, right? And a prayer can be so many different things. Right now, what we're talking about is the specific spiritual mind treatment. And fundamentally, it is the use of the law. So the answer to your question is possibly yes and yes. It could be that the practice was incomplete. It could be that I did my practice, my spiritual mind treatment, for a good 20 minutes about how lovely my life is in a particular area, and then spent the next 20 hours worrying about the fact that it's not, or wondering what's not right about it, or focusing on all the people that did me wrong, which is the reason why I'm in the position I'm in. Do you see, we begin to start undercutting the very thing that we are seeking to experience. Our treatment, we want to do our treatment to such a deep degree that we can override those underlying thoughts. Ultimately, our spiritual mind treatment is designed, to rewrite those thoughts and to rewrite that system that we have. And so we think that we're going to do a spiritual mind treatment in 20 minutes and it's going to be done. Okay, my experience is that's true when we've practiced for years. When I first started practicing, I was actually doing a treatment. I realized that I was doing a treatment for weeks, if not months, because it took me that long to actually shift consciousness. Do you see what I'm saying? I tried to do each spiritual mind treatment as if each treatment was fully shifting consciousness, but I was not yet accepting it. And so sometimes for me, a treatment, even though it looks like each treatment is a full thing, it's actually this big arc. And the reality of it is it doesn't actually fully kick in until we come to that place of deep acceptance. 1. 2, sometimes our treatment is rearranging the molecules of the universe. And sometimes it takes time. So we become impatient. I have done treatment for things that manifested 7 years later. That's apparently how long it took for me to shift consciousness, for me to do the legwork that went along with it, and for the molecules of the universe to be rearranged so that that manifestation could happen. I love what Michael Beckwith says. He says delay is not denial. It's just an opportunity to dig a little deeper. Now, one of two things will happen along the way. First of all, treatments that take a while to manifest, what will happen during the treatment is all the ways in which you don't believe this to be true will become revealed. All the yeah buts. All the ways you'll do these treatments week after week after week after week after week, and then realizing that you're spending month after month after month after month actually undermining your very treatment by your words, by the ways in which you talk about it, think about it, feel about it. Right? So rather than spending the time reinforcing your treatment every time you have a niggle of doubt, no, I did that treatment. Remember, this is what's true. No, I did that treatment. Remember, this is what's true. Right? We're bringing ourselves back over and over and over again to it. And so what we're getting to do is we're getting to hear what we actually believe. And that's then what needs to be shifted, rearranged. I notice if I'm doing a treatment about something that hasn't happened and it's over a period of time, that without just capriciously deciding I'm going to treat differently, my treatment changes, because sometimes I'm treating about a specific roadblock. Sometimes I'm treating about a false belief that I all of a sudden realize I have. Sometimes I'm treating about could I just get over myself and accept my good? Or right? So the treatment itself is shifting over time. 1. 2, I've done treatment for something that I really thought I needed or wanted, only to discover that really working on it, I was like, what really came up is that I only thought I wanted it. And that's okay too. That's a part of the reality too, right? As long as it's not an excuse, as long as it's not a giving up or a resignation, but you can have a very real feeling of, oh. So for me, it's just like, so I've been treating for, having more time for myself and doing more for myself. It's the perennial treatment in my life. It's the perennial treatment in my prayer partners. Sometimes I have to apologize that we're still praying about it. We're still doing treatment about it. And each time that I'm confronted with the fact that it hasn't manifested, or it manifested for a while and then it stopped manifesting, each time I've had to recognize that I have prioritized my family and my work over myself, and that I choose to do that. And I have to give up. I have to stop beating myself up for not having as much time for myself, because I actually choose to give right now. I choose to give a lot of my free time to my granddaughter. And I chose to give it to my son. As a full-time working mom, I didn't have a whole lot of time left over. And I chose to give it to my family. And so I had to really look at my own, like I thought I was treating for, I need to love myself more and have more space and time and go have more massages and yada, 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 blah, 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 none of which happened, because the truth is over and over and over again, I was choosing my family. And I love that. And so we have competing values. We have competing things we want, right? We have competing things we'd like to do or experience. And, we can't stay home and raise a child and, I don't know what we might say, have a globe-trotting a job that, you're in a different city or a different state every week, right? As a single mom, you might not be able to do that, right? So choices, competing values, and that's okay. And so what can happen in the treatment is the prioritizing, and our values can become more clear. And we can say, well, you know what? That's really not it. And that's okay. So we're the only one who know. And again, it's always about taking responsibility without blame or shame. Because what we do is we blame or shame ourselves. Well, I must not have done it right. Or we do the even, shall I just be judgmental? The even worse thing, and we say, well, Spirit must not want me to have it. No, the law is simply responding to the sum total of the consciousness, which is what you're doing in your treatment plus everything else that's going on in your consciousness at the same time. And what we're constantly doing is using our treatment to rewrite what's going on in our consciousness that's in conflict with what we want. That's why treatment is so amazing, because it's a track you can run on. And all that swirling going on around out here, you can go on that track over and over and over again in a very definite, actively deliberate manner, and start overwriting all of this other nonsense. And that's why it's called a practice and a discipline. And the last thing I would say, not only do we have to rearrange the molecules of the universe, but then of course we're in our home study groups, we're in our home study, our Step Out in Faith, which is called Emergence, Growing the Garden of Your Life. Some things not just do we need to rearrange the molecules of the universe, but some things take time to grow. Going back to our metaphor of learning an instrument, you're not going to sit down at an instrument and all of a sudden play Bach. There's so much to do as we get to that place, right? And so the same thing. You want to build a business. You want to go back to school. You want to move to a new location. All of that's going to take time and process and unfolding, and right. And so our spiritual mind treatment is what keeps us cheerfully expecting that everything along the way is actually going to move forward, and it's okay that it takes time. So all of those, so the answer is yes, 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 and yes, right? and this is where we're trying to do some grown-up spirituality here, which is we pay attention to ourselves, and we try to really, one of the most significant practices is to learn how to take responsibility without shame or blame. Taking responsibility is, this is what is. What is clearly an outcome of what came before. This is what is. Now what? Now what am I contributing in consciousness, causally, as well as in the doingness of things, right? Without shame or blame, we're not a victim of anybody else, and we're not a victim of ourselves. A truly, deeply powerful spiritual practice. I mean, you could spend months just on unhooking responsibility from shame and blame. And when we can do that, our spiritual practices and this kind of spiritual work becomes so much more effortless. And when it doesn't work, or doesn't appear to be working, right, we don't go into the hole. So these are great questions, right? This is why we're in community together, so we can practice together. And so when we're like, is it ever gonna happen, right? We go to our practitioner, we go to class, we go to our friends, we come here, we get the reminders. Yes, stay the course, stay the course, stay the course. Unless your soul tells you, maybe not, right? Maybe not. So good. All right. So it's deep stuff. And so we're going to keep working on our reading over the course of this week. Please, please, if you've never gotten a spiritual mind treatment from a practitioner, they're available every Sunday after the celebration, either in person or on Zoom, for those of you who are online. And to have somebody speak this kind of truth for and about you, and to just receive those words spoken over your life, could be one of the most miraculous experiences. And then you can borrow something of what they say and grab a hold of it and go, yeah, that person said the truth about me, so I'm gonna keep telling myself that truth, even when I go off over here. That, right? It's really powerful. And practitioners, you can put them on retainer, and they can treat for your business or treat for you for a month or whatever it is. You can do spiritual coaching with them to keep working with all the yeah buts that come up in spiritual mind treatment. That's why we have practitioners. Okay, so there you go. E-courses, practitioners, get in class, come here on a Sunday mornings. It's all good stuff. It's why we're in community together. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, online and here in the room. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.